Hezbollah right next door or the Iranians getting involved, because both of those groups have got a lot to lose if they were in a knockdown, drag-out war with Israel. Whereas they're very willing to fight to the last Syrian, the last Iraqi, the last Yemeni, or indeed the last Palestinian, to weaken Israel and damage the reputation of Israel in the US.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you, the Houthis, as you mentioned, have declared war for whatever that is worth or what it means against Israel. And we have seen repeated strikes from Israel and the U.S., in fact, in Syria. What is it that we should be looking for? As you mentioned, the Golan Heights and the skirmishes we're seeing in Syria. What could that turn into?
What we're really looking at amongst all of the Iran-backed factions is a way of looking like they're supporting Hamas and not letting Hamas down. But reality is they're doing what you would call casualty limiting attacks on the United States. In other words, quite carefully calibrated attacks that are not intended to actually kill Americans or draw heavy retaliation. Yeah. They're staying away from places like Embassy Baghdad in Iraq by mutual agreement between Iran and the United States. So, at the present time, it looks crazy, but it's actually a bit more controlled than people think. Even Lebanese Hezbollah, in its fighting with the Israelis on the border, has quite well-established rules, and they've been doing this a long time. So, yes, rockets and missiles are flying back and forth, but almost all the players seem to be focused on limiting the intensity and the geographic broadening of this conflict, whilst not being seen to let down their partners, for instance, Hamas.
You've been tracking anti-U.S. strikes in Iraq and Syria for the past couple of weeks. It's important research that you're doing as part of the Militia Spotlight that I'll point people to at your website, WashingtonInstitute.org. What's the trajectory here? Have you seen an increase, or has it been kind of a steady drip so far of attacks in Syria and Iraq?
Well, it's been very steady. For the first time since 2021, we've seen, a surge of of attacks against U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria. Key trend is that most of the action is moving to Syria at the moment, because Syria is a sort of failed state environment where we don't recognize the sovereignty of the Syrian government. So we can all fight freely there. The Iranian-backed groups can fight freely there. They don't have to worry about the Assad regime. And we can fight freely there because we don't have to worry about getting kicked out of the country as we would in Iraq if we started dropping bombs there. So, Syria is really where a lot of it is headed. What's really interesting is that last night, for the first time, we didn't get any new attacks on US forces in Iraq or Syria. And after, over a week and a half of attacks every day, multiple attacks, 4 or 5, to get none feels a little bit like when the tide recedes right ahead of a tsunami. It almost feels like someone's taking breath, and might be a bit of a rocky weekend ahead.
Wow, that's a scary thought, like someone who's taking a breath. So put this together for us, Michael Knights. Do all these attacks, all the proxy groups that we have mentioned, suggest a de facto declaration of war by Iran? Are we missing the ball on this?
Well, it's a de facto declaration of proxy war. And what that really means is this. The Iranians have already gained a lot of what they want from this conflict. Saudi, Israel, US normalization might be wrecked for a while. The Arab world's extremely angry at America and Israel. And a heavy blow was landed on Israel, the military defeat on October the 7th. At the moment, Hamas can probably disappear from the face of the earth, and Iran will still chalk this one up as a win. So they don't need to put their own homeland security in Iran or Hezbollah's survival on the line for this one. They just need to keep this news story going using all these lower level tactics.
Do we need to put our security on the line here in the U.S.?
I think the movement of the US carrier battle groups and the very heavy buildup in the Middle East has shown the Iranians and Hezbollah that they can't launch a new blow against Israel. And it probably has effectively kept them out of the war. They would have been tempted to come in heavier if they had not seen us come in so heavy. So I think what we've done has been quite effective from deterring the big war We can't deter the small war quite as effectively. These kind of low casualty or no casualty strikes on the US that mainly signal defiance.